I'm King Link, and it's almost Turkey Day here in America, so it's time for the Game Pass November 2022 review. This one is a bit late, but as you'll see in the list of the games, I wanted to cover Pentiment, and that came out on November 15th. The good news is I have that and many others, so we'll talk about all those titles and even give a hint of what's coming up next month, but that is for later. Normally I play only the PC version of the games here, but give me a moment and let me call out Vampire Survivors again. I've covered it previously on this series, and I remember I said you should buy it even if it is only on Game Pass. It is $5 on Xbox consoles, and I still believe it is worth the full price. It's a lot of fun, so console gamers, you have the chance, check that game out. I will guarantee you will enjoy it, and good luck hunting me down if you don't. This month I haven't played all of these titles as much, while I do sit down with them for a night, and quite a few of them are games I played previously or stopped for various reasons. We'll get into the why when applicable, but I've had some great experiences. Let's start with what's on the screen, perhaps the biggest release of the month.
It's true. Oh, look up there. The house with the weather vane. That's ours.
Oh, right above the market.
Yes.
Plague Tale Requiem, an amazing sequel, probably. Earlier this year I covered Plague Tale Innocence, and I found it to be a solid game and one that was extremely impressive. Plague Tale Requiem deserves that same praise. It's another technically solid game telling an interesting story as the family continues through another dangerous journey, at least I assume so. So I guess I'm going to have to admit this. I played this for an hour, not because there's a problem with this game, but I've yet to finish Innocence, and that's fully on me. I will say I noticed a few small animation issues, nothing too bad, but otherwise this was good. There's a large town scene early on where it took a location and really made it feel more populated and alive in a way almost no game does. But I didn't go much further because not wanting to spoil that first game, and honestly there is a big spoiler here early on as well, so do be careful about that. Pick this up if you've played Plague Tale Innocence. There's no reason to skip the first game, and Plague Tale Innocence is worth playing. I have heard people saying to read a wiki entry, but why? I mean, these are story-based games. You should really enjoy the story to the fullest, and people I fully trust are calling this worthy, so yes, this is definitely on my list. Soma, a different type of horror. Like I always say, I don't like horror, and yet I think Soma is amazing. I reviewed it 3 years ago and gave it a 4.5 out of 5, and I fully stand by that. Soma isn't a spooky horror game, it's more existential. The main character finds themselves transported from a normal life where they're just getting over a horrific accident to a strange world that's really unique. A big part of Soma is the monsters that harass the player, but I would say the enemies in Soma are why I played through the game, but hardly scary. If they're too difficult, there is a safe mode where players can just explore the game, but ultimately nothing here is hard enough or scary enough to warrant that mode. However, I will say Soma's ending has stuck with me, whereas almost every ending has faded. Soma's finale is exceptional, and it's one well worth experiencing for yourself with no spoilers. Pick this up if you like games with strong stories and science fiction. There are a lot of spoilers here, so I'm trying to avoid all of them, but the big thing is, while this is horror, it's not the same type of horror that's typically done in the games industry, and I honestly believe this is worth checking out for almost anyone. Amnesia Collection, Amnesia Dark Descent, and 2 other games. Amnesia Dark Descent came out in 2010 and was one of the scariest games of the time and possibly since. There's so much done in that single title that was innovative. Just something like tilting the camera to make the player uneasy adds so much and creates a terrifying experience, and that's just one of its many tricks. There's a brilliant dichotomy where players need to be in the dark to avoid monsters, but the dark also drives the player insane, and that works well. Amnesia games also heavily delve into resource management. You have a limited number of torches that can be lit and a limited oil reserve for your lantern, but those limitations push the player's fear. I honestly couldn't play this game when it first came out as my hand was shaking too much and I had to stop. And still, this series is one that I avoid due to how terrified that first game made me. Pick this up if you want to try Amnesia Dark Descent or you want more of the series. I've talked about Dark Descent because after that title you will know if you want to play more Amnesia. For me it's a firm no, but Dark Descent is still one of the best horror titles and should be experienced by almost anyone who likes the genre. Though I will also mention this is billed as a trilogy. The third game, Justine, is more like an hour-long DLC for the first title, and Amnesia has aged quite a bit, but I still think it's worth checking out. Amnesia Rebirth, a weaker Amnesia. Amnesia Rebirth is the most recent game in the Amnesia series and maybe the weakest. The player starts as a woman who wakes after her plane has crashed and she goes looking for the rest of her party and her husband. The plane crashed in the desert and trying to find anyone is a large part of the game. I'm still not a huge fan of horror, which hasn't changed in the last 60 seconds of course, but I'm also questioning if Amnesia Rebirth is supposed to be horror. It's a horror game that does everything to break your immersion. There are cutscenes, flashbacks, and puzzles, and so much of it breaks the atmosphere that the game uses to immerse the player. I covered the game last year, and after about 80 minutes I just stopped playing because honestly I was bored. Not scared, not terrified, but bored. And replaying it, that happened even faster this time. Pick this up if you've played the other Amnesia games. This feels like a cop-out, but let me be clear. Only play this if you played the other games from Frictional Games. Soma is a better story, and Amnesia The Dark Descent is a better horror game. There's nothing I would recommend this game for other than if you like the studio's other works. And even then, don't expect too much. Phantom Abyss, a 3D platform temple explorer. Phantom Abyss takes the idea of creating a super hard temple for players to explore and then has hundreds of players attempt the temple. The rules are simple. Players get a single attempt, and if they fail, they move on to another temple. While that sounds like a typical roguelite, Phantom Abyss has one other major difference. You can see how other players approach the temple, and their death will make the temple easier. There are a lot of interesting designs in this game, and the ability to be racing through a temple while looking at other players' attempts elevates this game quite a bit. On the other hand, before long you start to recognize most of the rooms as you're exploring. There's only a set number of pieces to run through. Another major issue is the idea at the core of the game is classic mode, but there's also this easier mode called adventure mode that most people are now playing, but it means the original formula has far fewer phantoms to compete with, and that's what this game was designed for. Pick this up if the idea here has interested you. I probably could go on for half an hour on how some of the designs here work. Just watching other people play show what's possible with the game mechanics, and there's this feeling of camaraderie when exploring a temple, even if you are just playing with other adventurers, ghosts, or spirits. Persona 5, the JRPG dating simulator, is here. The Persona series is strange. In Persona 5, players take on the role of a student who is transferring to a new school. The game starts with a large interesting heist to show the combat, but then the game switches to the player just arriving to that new school district after being accused of assault, which is actually quickly shown to be false. Persona has two halves. Half of the time you play a typical dating sim where you get to know different students, go on dates with them, and manage your time, whereas the other half has the player in dungeons, exploring them and fighting monsters. And if that sounds strange, you're in for a wild ride, as the bosses, dungeons, and the story is extremely unique. Pick this up if you like JRPGs with the solid but long dungeons and dating sims. You'll be doing enough of both, so you will have to get used to both of them. The story in the series is good as well, though I didn't play too much of this yet. I bought it on Steam for when I have a lot more time. This is a game that will easily take players 100 hours or more, and that's exactly why I'm excited to tackle it soon. Frog Detective. I just don't get it. The Frog Detective games are really popular, but after playing all three, I don't think I really get them. Each game is short, lasting under an hour. I'm not a fan of the writing and storytelling here, and while there's a good community for the game, I can honestly say that it feels like I'm missing something obvious. But I can also say I don't really fault the game. These are $5 titles where players sit down and go through what feels like a story for children. There are unique and interesting characters like Lobster Cop, but that's also kind of my complaint. He's a lobster cop. That's pretty much his defining character, and that's the extent of it. Pick this up if you like the writing on the screen. Like I said, it's hard to really hate on this game. I just don't think I get it. The jokes don't land. I don't find it particularly interesting or funny. But again, at the same time, there's really nothing I can object to. If you enjoy the series, I'm glad you do. Let me know down in the comments why. I'm seriously curious. Gunfire Reborn, an FPS roguelite. Earlier this year when RoboQuest came out on Xbox Live, people said to check out Gunfire Reborn. Now that I have, I understand why. This game is fantastic, and what I would point to as the type of roguelite I love. As you play the early game, you start gaining new guns and weapon abilities, and I found myself in a few runs which gave me great synergies that worked well for me, to the point where I felt very powerful. Only to get beat down on every run. I struggled on that first boss if I could even reach it, but that's what really makes roguelites interesting to me. There's a feeling that any run could be the run that breaks the game and lets you win, but almost all of them won't. Also, you can play this in multiplayer, which makes a good game even more interesting. Pick this up if you like roguelites. FPS fans will enjoy this, but it may be too easy if you're already a competitive FPS player. Still, this feels so good, I'm looking forward to playing even more of it. Signalis, a modernization of the original Resident Evil. Every time I boot up Signalis, I get waves of nostalgia. So much of this game is designed to evoke memories of classic survival horror games, from limited inventory space to isometric views. What's strange is Signalis does all of this without having to scream its influences. This is a great experience for a style of game that's been abandoned by its originators. The one issue I have with Signalis is that it takes a long time to get accustomed to the art style. It's really easy to miss items in the first hour or two of gameplay, where you just might walk by a key item and fail to notice that you can even interact with it. At the very least, that happened to me, and it left me a little confused. Also, because it's evoking an old style of combat, while the game is really good, it falls into the common resource management and combat tropes from long ago, though it is designed so you can avoid many of its encounters if needed. Pick this up if you want to try a sci-fi horror game. The art style here is really unique, which adds to the atmosphere of the game, and there's never a good feeling of safety. Even running into other friendly characters isn't the most relaxing experience.
I should call someone. Pick up the body.
Walking Dead, Michonne, and A New Frontier. I'm just going to group these games together again. I could really go deeper into these games, but I kind of covered them last month while I covered the original Season 1 and 2. The thing is, I don't have much more to say. Are these new stories? Yes. Are they in the same style? Yes. Do they have new characters? Yep. These two titles are supposed to be weaker games than the original series, but if you just are craving more Walking Dead, this is for you. If you haven't played Season 1 or 2, play those first. They are better experiences and will let you know if you want to continue on with the series.
我是在看鸟无点呢，低头。
要添丁，你今仔日
The Legend of Tianding, a Taiwanese folklore story in video game form. Tianding, and God, I hope I'm saying that right, is a Taiwanese folk hero. He's sort of like Robin Hood, fighting against the imperialist Japan while defending Taiwanese citizens during their occupation. This is made by a Taiwanese studio, so it's people who care about the story, and it shows in the comic style that's presented. There's a strong focus on visuals and great gameplay. The Legend of Tianding is a 2D beat-em-up with a focus on stealing enemies' weapons to help you defeat them. The bosses are colorful and unique. The one area that is a little lacking is the level design. While the levels are all different, they also feel like they're typical platforming levels, where everything else excels, though a few arenas for fighting did stand out quite a bit. Pick this up if you like the style. I think this game deserves a lot more attention. It's a fresh story and an interesting setting. The gameplay shines here. I'm coming back for more of this, even though I've heard it's not the longest game. It's already taken me longer than others have said it would take. Maybe I'm just being more thorough, or am slow as hell. Probably bad. Ghost Song, an exploration-based Metroidvania. Ghost Song does something different than Metroidvanias. In most of them, there are clear gates, and eventually players will find keys to those locations through abilities or items. Ghost Song instead pushes for more organic exploration. There's really a straight path in Ghost Story, and instead players will have to see which areas of the game they can go to. There's never a straight line, but more of an interesting and winding path to get to the next goal. While Ghost Song is tough if players just rush into every encounter, the game isn't that difficult. Also, many of the enemies are just different forms of humanoid, which feels underwhelming after a while. The exploration of a dying world is really good, but the story feels lacking in that first hour or two until you reach a group of survivors, and from there it's going to pick up. Pick this up if you want an interesting Metroidvania, one that allows the player to explore the world. There are touches of like Hollow Knight in here as well, but this also creates a unique world for our players, one that doesn't feel like it's been done before. I just wish the boss and enemy designs were a little bit better to make this feel unique. Football Manager 2023. It's more Football Manager. I could make a clever joke or repeat the previous year's review, but I'm not going to waste either of our times. This is the same thing. You have minimal control over your team while playing football. It's a management sim. It has almost no sound, it's confusing to get comfortable with, and even if you do, you're still not actively playing football. You're basically the GM of a team more than the coach. I'm amazed this is a yearly title and shocked people get so into this. But like last year, I've seen people go crazy for this franchise, and to those who love it, it's another one. I'm not going to pretend it's a huge change, and if you haven't played the series before, there's no reason to start playing it now. If you have, well, it's time for you to pay your yearly tax for a roster update.
I could stare at this forever, but that wouldn't be much fun for you.
Return to Monkey Island. This isn't the Monkey Island I remember. If you haven't played any Monkey Island games, you probably should start with the first game, The Secret of Monkey Island, and then the sequel. Return to Monkey Island doesn't really require these previous games, but would be like watching The Force Awakens as the first Star Wars movie you've ever seen. The references, stories, locations, and characters have an expectation of you knowing who they are. As for the actual Return to Monkey Island game, the gameplay really hasn't gripped me yet. Every puzzle is completely straightforward. Someone's mad at you, so you need to get them an item specifically for getting someone to forgive you. You need a splinter from a mop, so you just use a knife. There's more to these puzzles when you play hard mode, but it's a couple extra steps rather than deep and interesting puzzles with unique items. Pick this up if you've played the previous games. I mean, this is intended for fans of the franchise. However, I wasn't a fan of the art style in the trailer. Now that I've played it, it's not that bad, but I'm still not that impressed. It's a shame because this could have been the big return of the point-and-click genre, but it ended up feeling more like nostalgia baiting than anything, and from what I hear, the one thing they did keep the same as the original is the underwhelming ending all Monkey Island titles have. Somerville, a rough game of trying to figure out what to do. Somerville has the players exploring a large but empty world where aliens have come and the player gains the power to melt alien artifacts. I'd love to tell you how that happens, but there's not really a lot of actual story given to the player as the game lacks any dialogue. Instead, the player is given a series of puzzles and will explore the world as they go through them. The one issue that nagged me through Somerville is it's not always clear what the player can interact with or where the player should go. I couldn't find the basement, for instance, because I tried to move in that direction twice and it didn't let me. Several interactable objects are not clear, and even if you're next to them, they don't always activate. Much of the game is trying to guess what the developers expected you to do, and I would forgive this if it's their first game, but the producer and founder of this development studio previously founded Playdead, which made both Limbo and Inside. They're similar games, but this one lacks what made both of those games easier to recommend. Pick this up if you like Limbo and Inside for their silent storytelling. However, I do caution people. I dislike the try to guess what I'm thinking design that is at the heart of most of the puzzles in Somerville, and for me that ruined the experience. Pentiment, ye old murder mystery text adventure. I'm glad that text adventures have come back, or at least whatever Pentiment is. It's a style of game similar to Disco Elysium, and these games are getting good attention. Pentiment is about a murder mystery in the Middle Ages. The opening hour involves the player defining the character's past through dialogue choices, and those choices give the player different abilities and dialogue choices in the future, which appears to change the game. Though this is a very slow burn. You'll probably play for a couple hours before something major happens that I'm going to avoid speaking of. The writing also is from the time period, and while you can change the text to make it more legible, the words will be of a different style. There's a great glossary where you can understand the meaning of most words in the game with relative ease, but it's still very different. None of this is really a negative, but it's part of the game that the players are going to have to accept. Also, while there are puzzles, this is very much a story-based game, so be prepared to talk to people quite often. Pick this up if you like story-driven games. Disco Elysium or Planetscape's Torment are the most obvious parallels. The art reminds me a lot of Procession to Calvary from almost a year ago, but Pentiment is more serious in tone and features far better writing. And that's what I have for this month. Now there are 17 games as I count them, or maybe 18 if you want to count the console and PC version of Football Manager separately, but I'm not. And since I played a lot of these games previously or just knew what they were, like in the case of Walking Dead or Football Manager, I didn't give them the same time I've done in the past. That being said, there were a lot of surprise hits hidden in this list. An important one that doesn't make my top 5 list but is worth checking out is Gunfire Reborn. Give that one a look as well as the rest of my list. I don't have that much more to say about this month, so let's just talk about the strongest of the month. Starting with the 5th strongest of the month, it's the Legend of Tianding. This should be higher, but it's also a very tight month. This is a fresh and unique game. I really miss being surprised in the game industry with the topics people choose for their games, so it's great for something like Legend of Tianding to be released. The style and combat work well here, and that makes this easily worth checking out. The 4th strongest game of the month is Pentiment. While the text style was a bit annoying, the way the dialogue is designed is getting me interested in the characters, and the game does an amazing job of fleshing out an interesting and unique world. Again, one that you normally don't see in video games, at least not done like this. The 3rd strongest of this month is Soma. I love this game and I will recommend it to everyone. It's not the same type of horror you might be used to, but dear God, any game I think about as much as Soma after beating it is something really special, and trust me, the final minutes here will haunt you, and it's so good. The second strongest of this month, I'm trusting other people on this one, Plague Tale Requiem. I do intend to fully dive into this one, but I held off because I still have another game to play first. This is getting so many people talking about it as the game of the year, it has to be this high. Well, this high because there is of course one more. The strongest of this month is, we don't get to see many excellent turn-based JRPGs anymore. Persona 5. We don't get to see a AAA dating sim that are amazing to play. Persona 5. We don't get to see 100-hour games with 100 hours of unique content. Yakuza. Oh, and of course, Persona 5. Persona 5 is amazing to have and worth checking out. Give this one a shot. And that's it for November 2022. So before I get into some important channel news, I want to take a short moment and talk about the next month. Because this video came out so late, we have a list of the upcoming games for part of the next video. I truthfully haven't even started on this list, so I can't talk much to them, but I did cover Norco previously. I'm excited to see how these games turn up. There are 2 other titles confirmed, Hello Neighbor 2 and Battlefield 2042. Which I'm excited for because, like I said, I'm going to be ending my coverage of Game Pass, and because I don't care what the publishers think after that point, oh, I can be so vicious. And speaking of ending my coverage, there's an important change that I'm going to make. This is a bit long, so I apologize in advance. I always believe in testing theories, and there's an important theory that I have. I don't believe that monetizing YouTube channels should change how discoverable a video is. Unfortunately, to test this, I would also need to have a video that does almost the exact same number every time I release it, and I have one of those, my Game Pass video. So in the name of science, I'm going to be turning on ads next month. Nothing major, just a simple ad when you start the video, and we'll see the results. Maybe no one will care about this change, but I've always said I don't want to make this a money-making or chasing channel. That changes a lot of my mentality of making videos, and I've sworn in the past I'm not going to be monetizing. I'm breaking that rule, and if that makes you hate me, I understand. I'm honestly doing that in the name of a simple test. To prove that, I'm going to be donating 100% of the proceeds from that video to the San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance, an organization I fully support and one I think others should as well. And to go further, I'm matching the donation up to $100, which I say because just in case the video goes obscenely super viral, I am going to cap it. I expect the video to do poorly, and in that case I'm also going to just donate $20 because I like what they do and there should be a bottom to it as well. And since I am changing my policy, I will be making a new one here and tell you that going forward, if and when I monetize my videos for any reason, I'm going to be donating a portion of the proceeds to charity. It's going to be 100% unless the money reaches really stupid levels, and even then, at worst, it's going to be 50%. If you ask me at any point, I will always be honest about this because by saying I'm going to donate the money to charity, I feel like I have an obligation to both do it and be transparent about it. Alright, with that said, we have one more Game Pass video coming up in December. If you're curious about why I'm ending my coverage, to avoid reiterating the whole thing, check my October Game Pass video. At the end, I talk about it. I'll be putting up a link on this video as well as something else to watch. And yeah, I've skipped the mantra of subscribe, ring the bell, like, and comment because I've rambled on too long, but if you want to do any of that, please do so. See you next time.